Because I don't understand why I can't get this webcam to work for more than like a couple seconds. Alright, let's see. There we go. That's done it. Alright. So I wanted to briefly go over what I'm looking to do here. If you've watched anything on this channel, it's kind of a mishmash of. I've done some political coverage and like reviewing other people's videos. I've done some other gaming stuff, primarily Final Fantasy XIV things. I've done a couple class builds for Pathfinder. And so what I've realized is the two things that I want to do, and shocking surprise, is I want to talk about gaming stuff because that's primarily what I like to do with my free time. But I've also found an interest in like current events kind of thing stuff. Primarily, what I've enjoyed personally is listening to discussions and debates on a variety of topics. But more specifically, what I've liked doing, and this has just been me like ranting at my phone or at my computer screen or at nothing, is I like to examine the arguments being presented and kind of go over, obviously verbally, but in my head too, where I feel like the flaws in their logic are, or their own misunderstanding of their personal motivations behind how they've reached their conclusion, and so on and so forth. A really strong influence has been Destiny, especially over the last few months. I've been watching his content for several years at this point. And while I don't agree with a lot of what he'll say... Uh-oh, webcam did the thing again. Well, I don't agree with a lot of what Destiny says. I appreciate his logic bro approach to things. What's up, Bloom? How's it going? Thanks for stopping in. Sorry, I can't seem to figure out how to get my webcam to work properly, so you'll have to forgive me on this one. There we go. I can't. It works for like 2 minutes and then it freezes on me, and then I have to play around with it. Anyways, so yeah, I've really enjoyed his content in the sense that like I can follow where he comes from, where he's going with his explanations on things, his analysis, and I really like that he challenges people on what they believe, and he does an excellent job of confronting people on like, okay, so wait a minute, here's what you're saying. Now, explain to me how this is different from this, right? And if we agree that this and this are the same, then how is your reasoning for your conclusion here different from your reasoning for your conclusion here? I really, really like that. And that's kind of made me analyze things from a different perspective. And so what I want to do going forward is I kind of want to split what I'm doing here. Because I don't think these things mix very well. I appreciate that. Yeah. So I'm gonna lay out here what I want to do with my personal channel, and then I started another channel, and I'm gonna migrate all of my my gaming stuff to that. So I will include a link in whatever video gets posted to my gaming channel, and that's gonna be a conjoint project with my brother, possibly my sister, depending on whether she's interested. But anyways, regardless, I want to put a partition between these things, because what I've been doing to this point is kind of combining them both, and I don't feel like that's going to reach the audiences that I want. So what I'm going to do with this channel is this is going to be primarily about not necessarily politics per se, but what I want to do with this one is this is going to be my analysis channel, right? So primarily what I'm going to be doing on this one is I'm going to be watching videos, largely debates or like commentary stuff, even like I don't mean like debate bro debates or like Twitch panel debates, but even like I watched one where it was between the guy who was the finance minister in Greece when they had their their problems back in like the early 2000s, And he had a discussion with I forget what her position was, but she's a pretty prominent economist too, and they had an interesting discussion on like how can you save capitalism. So what I want to do with this is I want to analyze where people's arguments come from. I guess I have to get a new webcam that works better because this one's going to drive me nuts. And so I've got a few videos picked out. One of the major problems with this is going to be the fact that these videos are panel debates, and like the shortest ones are like an hour and a half. And if I have to pause and analyze, these are obviously going to be fairly long videos. So what I might do, and I part of the goal is to come into these things not having heard the arguments, so that I'm looking at these things fresh and not having like a pre-scripted like, okay, so here's where they went wrong. But on the other hand, a more researched approach to things might make more sense. I'm not really sure where I fall on that, but what I'm likely going to do is just the not having watched the video, not having listened to the arguments. Because I think that makes more sense for what I'm trying to do, which is arm people with like, okay, so here's a rhetorical trick, or here's a talking point, where it comes from, how do you understand it from their perspective, and then how do you explain where this is incorrect or inaccurate or so on and so forth. To me, that makes more sense than the video essayist, like 6 weeks of research kind of stuff, right? So that's what I'm going to be doing with this one. And then just kind of to, do you know Mr. B? No, I haven't heard of this person. A large chunk of where I got this idea is actually two people. So I've already discussed that Destiny is a primary source of inspiration for this approach to things. But another person is someone I follow on Facebook. Her name is Meg Slay, Megslay. And she's starting a media company. Well, no, I mean, so I guess it'll be a real life, but it'll be primarily politics, because that's where like the bulk of my knowledge is on these kinds of discussions. You could apply this to real life stuff, and like I may go down that vein of things if it makes sense. But like, okay, so like a branch subject would be like psychology. Like I've been listening to a lot of Dr. K, which I highly recommend, by the way, if you don't currently watch him. Healthy Gamer, very great project, fully supported. I'd be working as part of it if I could, which that's something that's in the future, hopefully something that's something I want to do in the future, specifically psychology. But anyways, so not too political. Yeah. So like, it's not specifically political. It's just gonna be more of like, the politics stuff will be where I launch this from. But it's more of like, okay, so this is what the person's saying. Now, how did they reach that conclusion? And so there's gonna be a lot of like, okay, so where's the cognitive bias in how they reached their conclusion? Is their conclusion sound? Yeah. So like, it's kind of hard to describe this, because it's gonna be like an amalgamation of like debate stuff, but it's also going to be like psychology, but it's also going to be like logic and reasoning with like a mix of philosophy. And again, the majority of this stuff is kind of pulled from Destiny, because that's a lot of what he does. He doesn't do the psychology stuff, but he definitely does the philosophical things, and like the logic aspects of things, like how did you reach this conclusion? Does it make sense compared to this kind of thing? But yeah, so and the reason why is this is kind of the important part of this, right? So aside from the fact that this would probably save me from yelling at my phone on my way to and from work while I'm listening to some of these really, really bad arguments, I also kind of the idea of educating people has always been something that I've enjoyed. Not strictly in the sense of like I want to be a teacher, but like in the jobs that I've worked, I've had to train people. I've had to get people to understand this thing and the next. I've actually, in both of the last places that I worked, I've had conversations with people about like, hey, just like things that I found interesting topics. So like one of the major people that's driven my understanding of things is a man by the name of Simon Sinek, which by the way I highly recommend looking up his works. Um, and so I'd explain what Simon Sinek's points were as far because like his big projects were like Know Your Why, which is just excellent life advice in general. And then his next big project was Leaders Eat Last, and so that's kind of an explanation as to like, well, how have we reached this point in the business world where companies are so willing to dispose of employees at the bottom rungs, and why does it feel wrong for the people at the top to be doing the things that they do, despite the fact that they're not illegal, blah, blah, blah. So that's really driven where I stand as far as these things go. But regardless, that's kind of what I want to do with this channel is point out like, okay, so here's someone's argument, here's where they're coming from, but here's where the flaws in their argument are. Here's a more logical way to either reach that conclusion, or here's a conclusion that makes more sense if we're following this thought process. Edutainment. Yeah. That's that stir up some curiosity. People probably didn't know they had. Yes, that's probably an excellent way of explaining it. Because that's actually what drove me to this. I got interested in politics back in like 2015, and I followed this strange pipeline because, and like everybody else, I have unique things that have touched on my life that have brought me to where I am as far as my understanding of things, and then like my unique mix of interests and the people I listen to and the subjects I'm interested in. And everyone has a unique perspective to bring these kinds of things. So a lot of what I want to touch on is how to understand people's points that they're trying to make, and if they're sound points or if there's some sort of cognitive bias, how do we recognize that bias? How do we recognize that bias in ourselves, but also how do we recognize it in other people so that we can understand why their arguments clash with our conclusions. Is there a middle ground? Stuff like that. And obviously I'm not educated in this in any formal fashion. This is a lot of like personal understanding of things. And some of this will be backed by science. So like I will be referencing some psychology stuff and not specific studies, but just like general psychology that I've either read or I've understood from some other point, or that I was actually taught during the little time that I did go to school. But then there's also going to be like real world data that we're going to be diving into. Man, this webcam is just not all right. I'm just going to switch over to here. You can have fun with this. I'm sorry. It's just pointless for me to keep trying to activate this webcam. I have to buy a new one. Actually, here, let's blind that. There we go. Yeah, you can enjoy the login screen. Anyways, so I've had a really, I don't want to call it a unique journey because I'm sure there's a lot of people that have come from this stuff. But let me fix. Nope, not that one. Apparently, I don't know how to type my own screen name or username, whatever you call it. Pseudonym. Anyways, so there we go. Yeah. So just a brief. Well, I don't know if I want to call. Yeah, it's definitely a brief history. So brief history of where I'm coming from with this. So I grew up very religious and very conservative. Webcam. Well, I wanted to give some, something interesting to look at. And anyways, so yeah, I grew up very religious. I grew up very conservative. The whole pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Personal accountability is always the best approach. A lot of the stuff that gets talked about nowadays that I've realized through personal experience as well as the experiences of those close to me who've been able to explain things, that there are flaws in that mindset and that thinking, one of the major influences was my younger brother, who came out to us as gay when he was in junior high school. And again, being very religious, we did not receive that very well. He was absolutely ostracized from the family. We didn't kick him out or anything, but like all of us, my parents, both my parents, my younger sister, and my older brother, and me, were not good to him. And it was definitely something that, looking back, I wish I had handled differently. But also understanding that I didn't have the knowledge and the understanding of that perspective to really handle that properly. So, anyways, through years of him, and he's always been a very intelligent person, and so he would come to us with this information, like, okay, so this is why your line of thinking is harmful to me as a person. This is why it hurts the community that I belong to, blah, blah, blah. All that kind of stuff. And I don't want to say blah, blah, blah. That's a bad way of phrasing that. But through years of him educating us on his perspective, on the things that we believed and how they're inaccurate and in many cases wrong, led to a greater understanding. And one thing led to another. And his constant how do I phrase this? Because he wasn't like browbeating me, but like he obviously wanted us to understand him and where he's coming from, right? So that these conversations through the years kind of led me to a better understanding of not just his perspective, but also of mine, right? That I had spent the first 20 years of my life without having my perspectives challenged. Everyone that I grew up was like me, had a similar background to me, believed the same things as I did, right? Not just politically, but even religiously. And so he got me to question all these things that I believed, and that I had unquestioningly believed for the entirety of my life. And so taking that new mindset into examining the things that I thought were universal truths, that were unassailable truths, I slowly came over from being a very hardcore conservative, personal responsibility, bootstraps mindset to, well, maybe I don't know everything, right? And if I don't know everything on this subject, what else don't I know? What have I assumed that I do know that like I actually don't know squat, right? And just throughout the last, I'd say like 10 years, maybe longer, but very specifically the last like 7-8 years, I've very much taken a different approach to how I looked at things from when I was younger. And maybe that's just because of people take that approach when they get a little bit older, realizing that like, hey, I don't actually know everything. Or maybe that's just maybe it is specifically because he opened my eyes to like this concept. But anyways, the point being that I came from very right-leaning origins to I'm pretty far left-leaning now. And I hate categorizing things that aren't served well with a label, but if I want to ascribe a label to my politics, I would say I'm strongly in the Soc Dem camp. I'm a social democrat. I do believe, and that's not to say that I don't understand conservative points of, like personal accountability is definitely something that people should practice, right? But personal accountability cannot overcome systemic influences, right? And so that's where I've come from. And again, so several of the major influences on my way of thinking are obviously my younger brother, but several key figures have been I mentioned him earlier, but Simon Sinek is a very has a very interesting perspective on, or brought an interesting perspective to me on the way things work, or the way I thought things worked. And without going too far into what he talks about, it was a lot of like, okay, and the primary thing that he brought to my thinking is human beings evolved along very specific lines. And so I don't like the phrase we're wired this way, but like evolution drove us down specific paths. And so there are ways that we work biologically. And what I mean by that is primarily through the mental processes that we use, but also through there are social aspects, which is another part of our evolution. We evolved as social creatures, and so social factors are strong drivers in our behavior, along with the way our brains process things. So the chemical processes, which also brings me into the psychology aspect of things, right? So like I took an interest in psychology pretty early into college. I went into college thinking I'd be doing stuff with computers. I took a psychology elective course, and after 2 weeks in that psychology course, I went, this is what I want to do. This is the stuff that I find fascinating. And so, granted, I only took maybe 3 semesters of college, all of which I failed the majority of my classes. I was a terrible student. But anyway, so there's a lot of that. I've spent a lot of my personal time either listening to things or doing, and I don't want to call it research, but like reading up on subjects regarding psychology. So there's a lot of that influence in there. I've mentioned a couple times, but Destiny is a big influence on my particular brand of thinking and rationalization, and how I want to approach the subjects that I will be looking at. Again, I don't agree with a lot of what he says, but he comes at things with a unique he comes at things from a unique angle, and I always appreciate what he brings to those discussions, and whether he's reviewing someone and calling them insane and trashing their arguments, or whether he's reviewing his own debates and analyzing, I should have pivoted here, or I should have pressed him on that. Again, I like his approach to thinking about things. And then someone else that I've really appreciated watching is, and he's a really big YouTuber, or sorry, not YouTuber, he's a really big streamer. Now, granted, I don't watch any streams. I only ever really watch their YouTube content because I don't care for live streaming all that much, ironically. But Hassan Piker is another big person that I've enjoyed watching, and that's kind of where this style or my format's going to be coming from. And Vosh is an influence in this way too. But I like watching them in real time hear an argument and then break down how it doesn't make sense with like the information that they have in hand. Now, part of that's going to be because like they're so familiar with the arguments that they know the information that disproves that argument or that substantiates that argument. And that while that's good, I don't want to come from it from that perspective. I do want to come at it from largely a rationalization and logical processes angle. Now, that being said, I do clearly spend a lot of my time playing video games, as does my younger brother, as does my sister. So I tried to kind of start this family project, or sibling project, I should say. So if you have been watching my channel for the video game stuff, I will be continuing that. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of health problems lately. I am going to see a doctor next week. Hopefully I'll get some answers. Nothing that's like going to kill me or like that's like majorly detrimental to my health, but it does put a damper on like what I can do with my free time. And it's made it very difficult to keep a regular schedule. So what I do want to do is I do want to separate out different days for different material. So my weekends are primarily going to be gaming stuff. Although what I'll probably do is I'll probably dedicate a big chunk of my Saturdays to covering the the analytical content that I've been talking about here. And then because of Final Fantasy XIV, my Raid Static is starting up this weekend. So my schedule for my gaming stuff will be Friday and Saturday nights. And then Saturday, like morning/afternoon, will probably be for the analytical stuff. And then I haven't figured out what I want to do as far as weekdays go. I'll probably pick like a couple days for each of these aspects. So I'll probably take a couple days of focusing on the analytical content, and I'll probably take a couple days where like I'm playing different games. I have been a little focused on, or not focused, but I've been diving pretty deeply into RimWorld lately. The problem with RimWorld is it's not very entertaining content in the minute-to-minute gameplay, so like live streaming that would be hard. However, putting up videos would require a lot of editing. Yes, I am hoping to turn up some good news. I have some suspicions as to what the problems are. It's a matter of, do I need medication to deal with them versus like, do I need medication, or are there like I don't want to say treatments, but like, are they like, what can I do with my routine or my diet that maybe will help? Destiny. So he's very inflammatory. He starts some fights online, but that's because he's a pretty obstinate person. He believes what he believes very strongly, but to be fair, that is warranted in the sense that like he doesn't reach conclusions lightly. He does take into account a lot of information. He does a lot of research on his personal time to either substantiate or debunk the ideas that he believes. And he's also willing to change his position on things. He's stated several times that he believes, or that his positions haven't really changed over the years. There are some things that he's been moved on. But I think that right there is kind of telling, in that like, and this is what bothered me about like Hillary Clinton when she was running in 2016, right? Was like, she said that she always believed, or that she always supported gay rights, when like there is literally video evidence of her saying that she doesn't, right? And so that dishonesty immediately discounts someone, in my opinion, from being taken seriously, right? If you can catch someone saying, I never said this, and then they actually, and there's hard evidence that they did, and you can present them with that evidence, and they're like, no, and you still deny it, that's someone who's dishonest, right? That's disingenuous, and I'm not going to believe you. And it's not, and that comes from this belief that like, if you can be moved off of your position, then you never believed in it that strongly in the first place, and I don't think that's true. As someone who believed one set of things and was exposed to new information, new ways of thinking, I moved off of that, and I am very much someone who advocates for, you shouldn't believe in anything so strongly that you can't be moved off of it. I think that the only acceptable approach to these things is that you believe what you believe because you've been presented with information that confirms that. Now, without getting too much into like presuppositional stuff and confirmation bias, like and having an answer before you're presented with the information to reach an answer, that's stuff that I'll cover when I go over content. But again, to circle back to what I was saying, I believe very strongly in, you should be able to be moved off of your position if presented with information that makes it a logical position to be moved from, or position to be moved to. That no one should ever believe so strongly in a position that they cannot be moved off of it if presented with appropriate information. Because that's how you should reach your conclusions. That's how you should believe what you believe, is because either you've experienced it, which is important, but it's not... I'm going to skip that. But yeah, so that's largely what I'm going to be looking to do with my personal channel. And since I just created the gaming channel, it'll probably take a couple days for me to, move things over. So, again, anyone who's subscribed to my channel, all 23 of you, I will be continuing to do the gaming content. I want to really get into it this year, and I don't mean like really get into it like do it full time, because I can't. I have a 9 to 5. As much as I would love to do this for a living, there's definitely not the money there. And even if that was the case, I'm much more interested in the analytical stuff, because what I'm looking to do here is I'm looking to make a difference in people's lives. And as fun as gaming is, what I really want is to, as I've thought about this over the last few years, I want to have an impact on people's lives in. It's complicated, but I think I get what you're saying. Well, that's another thing, is I'm not super concise in the way I talk, which is something that I hopefully will be working on as I go through this personal project of mine. But yeah, what I'm hoping to do with this is I'm hoping to educate people, and not just teach what I've learned over the years, but also teach them the skills that will allow them to analyze things in the way that I analyze them. And that's not to say like I'm 100% accurate or I have all the answers, because I don't. I would never say that I do. But I think I've reached a pretty sound way of thinking about things and examining information and arguments when presented, which I feel like, especially over the last couple of years, is something that I'm trying to phrase this carefully, but like I'm really concerned with what I hear, not just online, but even in my personal life, like the lines of logic that people use to reach their conclusions, and how easily I'm able to sway people from something they quote unquote believe very strongly in, just by presenting them information that they weren't aware of. Something to look forward to in future uploads. Yes. So again, I'm going to try and get a regular schedule as far as this stuff goes. The analytical stuff, again, will primarily be like very long-winded. And it probably will not appeal to the audience that I've been cultivating, the small audience that I've been cultivating so far. So, again, if you are here for the gaming stuff, that will be migrating to another channel, which I will be linking in the video description below. And if you'd like to stick around for this personal project, I would appreciate the views as well as the interaction. And then another thing that I briefly wanted to touch on was I don't want this to be a very large. I want the project to be large in the sense of like what I'm doing with it in my personal life, but I'm not looking to get like 1 million subscriber channel. I'd like to keep this relatively small. I want to be able. I want a small community that I can reach, that I can interact with. Not like every person every day, but I don't want to. If you've watched any streamers, like I don't want the chat scrolling by to the point where like I can't see anything, that I have to like scroll back to or pause to even like see what one person's saying. So yeah, that's where I'm looking to go with this. And that's just, the brief history of where I came from and how I've reached this point. I read every comment on every video. And I'd also like to interact with chat more. So I'm going to be looking at like ways I can integrate this into so I can see it better while I'm doing things. Because right now I have to literally turn to a whole other screen, and it's on the far other side. So maybe I'll have to change my setup or whatever. But yeah, I guess that kind of covers all of it. So if you've listened to my ramble to this point. I appreciate it. So thank you, Bloom. And yeah, that's what I'm looking to do in the near future. So if you stick with me through this journey, definitely going to appreciate it. And I hope you can learn from my experiences and ideally save yourself some frustrations and mistakes, because that's the point of experience. But anyways, that kind of covers this subject. So I will be ending the stream, since I'm not going to be doing anything terribly eventful as far as Final Fantasy XIV goes tonight. But yeah, if there's any topics that you want me to cover that like are of particular interest to you, leave them in the comments. I will be creating a Discord, which I will also be putting a link in, and I'll work on getting separate channels for the gaming stuff versus the Amiclo stuff, like I talked about. So yeah, if there's any content that you have an interest in that you would like to see me cover, feel free to let me know. Both gaming wise and real life content wise. But yeah, I look forward to doing more of this. And like I said, I want to get a regular schedule going so that you start building this project out, and hopefully an audience will follow. So yeah, all right. Thanks, Bloom. If you're interested, I can start streaming again, but like I said, I'm just going to be doing like my daily stuff for Final Fantasy XIV. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and hopefully you'll catch